Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Alex Stinson. I will be doing today's webinar, and it is great to see so many familiar names, or I was going to say faces, but obviously I can't see you, on today's webinar. And for those of you that are new, welcome. We're always happy to have new people join our family. So Happy New Year's, everyone. And this is the first webinar of 2020, so hopefully it's going to be a good start for the new year, for the new decade. I'm not sure how much I need to spend on this slide since many of you are familiar with us and have been working with us for many years, and we appreciate your support. So PROergonomics is an ergonomic consulting and training firm. We really pride ourselves in being experts in the ergonomic industry and kind of really driving home productive and impactful ergonomic programs for our clients, as you know, whether that be documentation that you need to support your program or training or further assistance from that. So yes, if you're not familiar with us and you'd like to learn more about us, please give us a call. Jen, Sarah, or I, which are the three owners, would be more than happy to speak with you on your ergonomic needs. So for those of you that are familiar with us, I hope you have your ergonomic, wish list set for 2020, and that this is just going to hopefully be the starting to getting ready on how we can maybe maintain our program, improve our program, make it better, fix its gaps, all of the above. So it's ergonomic program maintenance is the focus, and don't just put on repeat. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of our maintenance challenges, looking through kind of what is a standard ergonomic program, what are some additional considerations that you could do that maybe seem outside of the realm of possibility on where you are right now, but actually if we're implemented, we find they go really well strategically on helping the whole maintenance part of this question or problem. And that if we have these elements, that we often will see that the program runs a little bit smoother. So stay tuned for those, and then some strategies and considerations to consider of, if the maintenance part is becoming challenging and overwhelming and the program is hard, then let's take a step back. Let's kind of review some of the why that might be happening and what we have found to be helpful and beneficial for the clients that have programs that are really succeeding and doing well. So I'm going to make a disclaimer here, and it's not to scare anybody off, but I do want to just highlight that I understand that, for the 28 or so people that we have attending today, that you may be in very different spots. Your program may be one that's been going for years and decades and is fairly strong and robust, and we're just looking on ways to kind of maybe make the maintenance part of it easier, which is great. And then there's some of us that maybe either just starting and don't even know where to go with our ergonomics program, and then I'm guessing there's the bulk of us that kind of have an ergonomics program. It's not what we necessarily want it to be, and it's a bit of a challenge for us that we are kind of the lone flag holder, and the whole ergonomic programs lands on our shoulders, and it's a bit of an uphill battle. So the content that we're going to be going through, the elements that we're going to be showing, are kind of the ideal, what we have found to be. And when we see clients and organizations doing this, it really kind of becomes a self-sustaining entity. So it may not be all possible today, but these may be things that you can consider, put in your ergonomic wish list, whether it's for 2020 or maybe we're looking down the road at 2021. We don't even want to say that year already. Let's just enjoy 2020 for now. But I just want to kind of give you a bit of a disclaimer as kind of where we're going to be going with some of this content. So the first thing I'm going to actually ask is what I would like to see, and what I would ideally like to do is have a follow-up webinar to this, where you may find that this is a little high level and you have very specific challenges that you would like answers to. So if you are interested in that, if there's something that maybe you could get a little bit more useful information of, if you could either go on LinkedIn or email us, contact us however you want on whatever platform we have, which are many and bountiful. But let us know what your specific challenges are and kind of how we can better answer and help your question out. So that's my first or question or challenge that I put out to you guys is to tell me where your struggles are when it comes to maintaining your ergonomics program, because we can do a follow-up to this webinar and maybe dig a little deeper so that, yeah, we're just getting a little bit more specific. So the most common challenges that we hear are going to be time. It's a big organization you may work for, even if it's a small organization that you work for. There's lots of people that are kind of involved, and they may not be all champions of the ergonomics program that you're trying to sustain. So you may feel that you are that white flag holder, and the problem is, for most of my organizations and clients that I work with, you're not just ergonomics. You do many other things and wear many other hats. So if ergonomics is not your only focus, obviously time becomes very constraining. And how are we going to figure out, just needle out time for the ergonomics component of our job description? So that's definitely one of our challenges. We often find, we need a space there, that safety, our productivity, some of our client customer services, all of these things may also be taking a more important role as far as the organization's concerned. So trying to elevate ergonomics above some of those things is challenging. And if those other things are being prioritized ahead of ergonomics for you, then again, time is of the essence. And other things we'll often see is sometimes we just bite off more than we can chew. We have programs that are just too robust and too overwhelming for the single man captain of the ship. So we'll be talking about kind of how we can maybe manipulate some of those things to not just get you some more time, but also give you a program that's going to be realistic for the time and the energy that you have for it. The next part is the whole surveillance part of your program. So as we kind of go through and we're talking about some of our other challenges, a lot of this kind of comes back into making sure we're monitoring and maintaining. I mean, this really is the topic of the whole webinar. So if we don't have the time to do the program, the chances are we're also not going to have time to do the maintenance or the surveillance of the program. And if we can't readily or honestly say, yes, the program is going well and it's, it's a steam train and a force of its own and it's just trucking along and I don't have any worries, well, chances are you're not going to be on this webinar. But second of all, the two of them feed each other. So if we can't do one, we can't do the other. And if we can't answer the question that the program is going well and the maintenance of it is up to date and where it needs to be, then we also often start flagging on the next two. So this one is probably my highest level of frustration from my clients, is that they really do not feel that they have support, that ergonomics is not the only hat they wear, but they are the only one that does it, and everyone complains about it. So it becomes kind of challenging, again, to go back and do the surveillance of it if it's something that you're feeling that people aren't seeing the benefit of, that people aren't kind of giving you the support or the resources that you need. So it could be kind of a staffing thing, whether it be from upper management, whether it be from frontline staff with unions. You may not have the financial support, you may not have the resource support, or the entire focus of your organization is so focused on another, I have production base, but it could be another element that's kind of just everyone's give support to that area and they're not really giving support to the ergonomics. It could even be safety. Safety may be your primary role, or return to work may be your primary role, and you have support for that. But actually moving some of that financial support and energy from the employees and staff into the ergonomics realm, they may not see the benefit. So that can be challenging. And we'll try and touch on that one. That one could probably be a webinar on its own, but definitely I understand that sometimes the maintenance of an ergonomics program falls short because you just don't have the support to do it. But going in from there, the last one is, and sometimes this is one where, I often see people kind of beat themselves up about it or get very frustrated and throw their hands up in the air, kind of going, I don't know what I can do here. And that's the performance of our program. Ideally, and I'm not just saying this aligned because I'm an ergonomist and I want to believe it, but I really truly do believe that ergonomics that's done well impacts every level of an organization in a positive way. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't believe that. So, but if we don't have a program that's working and maintaining itself, then we're not going to see the performance that we need to do. And that performance may be right now for a lot of us strictly based on your injuries. And if that's the case, we may start finding that we have challenges showing that our program is beneficial, that our program is, an important and key element to not just the safety program, but the organization as a whole. So if your program's not performing, if it isn't, you do feel like it's performing, but no one is kind of taking notice of it. It's not registering to other departments, to upper management, to the unions that there is a benefit here, which has been often the case. I've seen lots and lots of instances where, we talk to people and we look at the numbers and no, injuries are going down and things are looking good, but it's not necessarily, the credit's not being given to the ergonomics program. So we're still not seeing the support and maybe the time elements aligning nicely. We may not be able to find that there's a return on investment. We may have dissatisfaction in any staffing hierarchy that we have, and we're being too silent about our successes, which kind of then plays into that whole, the performance isn't registering. So we're going to kind of look at each of these 4 common challenges. And as I said, if we do a follow-up, I'd like to kind of maybe dig down on one or more of some of these issues that maybe are being more important to you. But at this point, we're just going to look at these high-level kind of challenges. And I think at the end of the day, what we need to kind of come back to is, what does our program need? What are the requirements? So before we start getting fancy, and we'll get fancy, we'll talk a little bit about fancy as we go on, but before we start getting fancy, we really do need to understand that what are our legal requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act with Ministry of Labor, and what is the expectation, the bare minimum. Because if we're having troubles getting support, if that is where we're hanging our woes and our troubles for today, then this is one where it's easier. It's easier to get our support when we are aligning it with legal obligation. So when we're looking at what are our requirements, they definitely touch on all of the elements that we just talked about. So steps 1 and step 2. So this is, just to kind of step back. This is a screenshot from the MSD prevention guidelines, which is aligned with the MOL, and they are basically outlining as best as they can what program or plan they expect, if they come in, you to have. So if you are having a lot of MSDs in your organization or your workplace, and you're looking for, where to start, and this is brand new to you, this is it. This is the bare bones. It doesn't look too bare bones when you look at it, but this is kind of the expectation of the program that we want you to have. So the first one you can see is very much the support, demonstrating management commitment and leadership, facilitating, encourage worker participation. That's going to bring in, as I said, your frontline staff, your unions, and your upper management. And that's interesting that those are steps 1 and 2. I will say, from personal experience, that sometimes we don't get to those 2 until steps 9 and 10. And that's maybe unfortunate, but that is the case for a lot of us as we start with steps 3, move forward, and it's not until we kind of get through the review and the process and we are proving ourselves that we actually start to demonstrate the resources and the support from steps 1 and 2. So we'll get there however we can, but if you have it to start, that is great. pat on the back for that as we go. So the next one is definitely going to be our time. All of steps 3 through 7 are all going to be time sucks. We're looking at the hazard identification, the risk identification. How are we going to do them? What is our procedure and our policy and the documentation, the supporting documentation to make our program actually maintain itself? So step 3 is really, really key. If you're struggling with step 3, and I'm not touching enough on it today, please give me a call. Step 3 is something that there are lots of resources out there that we can kind of maybe figure out a way that your program has those in a robust element, because if those are robust, then the next kind of 4 elements will come. They just may take a little bit of time. So once we have the policy, the program, the procedures, the checklists, all our tools and tricks of step 3, then we can get into the action phase of this program. And that is our hazard identification, our risk assessments, our control hierarchy. How are we going to minimize or eliminate these hazards that we've identified? And what are our training objectives for our staff and employees? And then we'll kind of move into, oddly enough, performance kind of only, well, I mean, performance could come through all of these, but step 8 is really focusing on the organizational performance. If we're not doing well in all of these, we'll often see that it's really challenging to show that the program is good, is self-sustaining, is a cultural element within the organization, and that it should be supported because it does good things. And the last one, obviously, is our surveillance. So looking at where are we going? Are we doing well? Is it maintaining itself? Is it an uphill battle? All of these kind of questions are going to be answered. And some of these questions may be questions that you ask yourself and check off that, yes, no, I'm doing well, but ideally it wants to be a little bit more global than that. Ideally it wants to be kind of more multi-departmental, and I'll probably say that word or muck up that word several times today. So this is the basics. So keep those in mind as we go forward. Sorry, I keep messing up my clickers. So when we focus on time, the key things I want you to think about, if time you feel is that was something that really resonated with you and you're like, yes, that's my challenge, time, I just do not have enough of it, then let's take a step back. Let's look at your program and really come back to what do we need to do from a legal standpoint. Okay, the 2 things we need to be doing is we need to be identifying hazards. How are you doing that? Sometimes I go into organization and I ask, how are you, handling your hazard identification? And you are the only one doing it. The only one when it comes to ergonomics going through and identifying those hazards. That is going to be a very hard program to sustain. Because as I said, very few, maybe some of you on today's webinar have an independent ergonomist looking at it. Even if for the companies that I do have, very rarely do they have their own ergonomist. Often they'll have to share an ergonomist with several sites. So, time is still challenging no matter where you kind of are on that hierarchy. So we're going to start with our basics requirements: hazard identification, hazard control. And once we can get those kind of moving, we'll see that kind of a culture starts to build. So one way to make time up is delegate. If you are the only one doing it, I will tell you right now, the Occupational Health and Safety Act doesn't necessarily put that onus on you. It says that hazard identification should be being done by supervisors, by joint health and safety committees, by lots of people in the organization. You are maybe just one cog in that wheel, but there should be lots of people going through and identifying those ergonomic hazards. So if you're struggling with that component, that delegation component, the question I have for you is, do those people know what ergonomic hazards are? Do they understand what the things are that are causing MSDs in your workplace? Because if not, then that could be, a relatively simple fix of just training your supervisors making them aware, do get some hands-on where they're kind of going out and they're being, yes, that's force, yes, that's repetition, I see it, I can feel it, I can measure it, and, you know, they're engaged with what those hazards are. They work, you know, with the staff, with the product, with the customers, day in and day out, depending on what your organization does. They are going to be very familiar with where they can identify the hazards. They just may not know what those hazards are, or may not be thinking about it the same way that you or I might be. So training would be an easy way to, yes, we're going to train you. You're going to be familiar. You're going to be comfortable with identifying these things, and that's going to be part of your job. It already should be, because the Occupational Health and Safety Act has it under their roles and responsibilities, but we also want to see that being embedded in the program so that the maintenance of the program, that hazard identification component, isn't being done by you. You're saving time because it's being put on the person that should be doing it, or persons that should be doing it. The second one is using your committees. We'll talk about this a little bit more, because this would be one that, yes, if you were using your Joint Health and Safety Committee, or if you're not, then we maybe should, but we could look at, you know, first off, they do workplace inspections. Definitely an area we can embed in ergonomics there, but we could also use as reviewing reports. If you have PDAs or CDAs, your Joint Health and Safety Committee could be part of the review component, so that your documentation, which really is a foundational component to your program, is being maintained. It's just not being maintained by you. It's being maintained by your committee. So I would say the ones that are doing it successfully, they usually have, you know, it's not a big number, I will say that, but usually once a month, they'll try and look at one document and review it and sign off and say, yes, this needs to be, it's good, it's still valid, it's still current, we can keep using this, or we red flag it and say, no, this needs to be updated. And then it becomes the next part of the program. How are we going to do that? Are we going to do it in-house? Are we going to go external? Those are all decisions that you can make. The best way that I can say is trying to build in those time saver elements. So look for areas within your organizational structure that you can align. Find your best friends. Find the programs that really kind of fit nicely with what you're trying to do with your ergonomics program, and build them into each other. And that may be, you know, a bit of back and forth with whoever's department or program is, you know, responsible for that program. You're going to maybe need to talk back and forth and try and figure out how we can align better. But if it's embedded everywhere else, then it's not just you doing it. It's every department's going to have a say, a stakehold, and some input for that element of your program. And that is definitely, I would say, bar none, when I see a program that is really impactful, really self-sustaining, you know, really runs on its own. You know, it's something that, yes, you go through the tick boxes, but everything's being done. You're never having this paperwork of a mountain of paperwork to kind of go through. And they are the ones where ergonomics is a multi-department element. And we'll talk about that too in a little bit more detail in a second. So when we're going back to basics, we're going to start with your hazard identification. So what does that mean? Are you using checklists? Let's make this easy for people. If people are not familiar, you know, when I can definitely rile off what the main ergonomic hazards are, and I'm sure many of you are looking at the names that I'm seeing, you know, ergonomic hazards are not unfamiliar to you. So it seems logical that they seem to be fairly easy to identify, fairly easy to see and witness. And I mean, there's 7 really when we're talking about it. We're talking about 7 hazards that we have to. It's a much, much shorter list than the safety list for hazards go. So it seems it should be very doable. The problem is, if you're going to start delegating, they don't see it that way. They may live in the world of, you know, patient care, or they may live in the world of production numbers or quality. And, you know, those 7 hazards just are not their lingo. They're not their comfort zone. So let's make it more comfortable. Find a checklist that works for you. Take that checklist, kind of take it to, you know, those people and say, how relevant is this to what we do? How can we maybe customize it and make it a little bit more usable so that at the end of the day, you're not creating laundry lists of hazards, but when you identify a hazard, it's been customized to the point that it really highlights it to a priority level. So checklists, best friend. My best friend should be your best friend and should be your organization's best friend. Workplace inspections, as I mentioned earlier, you have to do them. It's a legal requirement. If your program is not including ergonomics in their workplace inspections, technically, we are not, being upholding to the letter of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So look at your workplace inspection. For those of you that have been following us for a while, we've had lots of webinars. You can go back to our YouTube. There's sections of those of how maybe you can do that if you don't. And if you do have an ergonomics section in your workplace inspection, but it's not working well for you, it's not delivering the information you need it to so that it's propelling your ergonomics program forward, then let's go back and revisit those. So workplace inspections have to be done. It's a requirement. Let's put ergonomics in there as well, because that way we know something is happening with ergonomic hazard identification every month. Accident investigations, that's another one, has to be done. I would say, and again, we just finished, I believe it was in the last quarter, I did a webinar that was kind of the ergonomic detective and how you take an accident investigation and turn it more into an ergonomic, I guess, theme, for lack of a better word. But definitely, I would say accident investigations, when they are MSDs, are on the whole poorly done, is my experience. I don't get great data back when I look at the accident investigations, and if that's what you're receiving, that is making your job harder. That is a program that is very hard to maintain when you're not getting good information back. So because at the end of the day, an accident investigation on an MSD that's done poorly or not done at all means that the controls may not be putting in, or the controls that are being put in may not be actually controlling for the hazard or the injury. So it has to be done. It's part of the program. So let's look at taking that element that is currently being done by other people and broaden their horizons a little bit so that when an MSD issue comes up, an accident investigation or a form of accident investigation may be slightly different depending on what your program wants to take it, and that we start to see kind of those elements coming in. The last one is a really key one, and it's definitely one that I would say some people do it really well, but on the whole, again, we get a lot of reports, and sometimes those reports seem like stars in the sky. They're so out of reach of where you can go or what you can do. But often these employee reports, whether they're complaints, whether they're feedback, whether it's satisfaction reports, however you're getting this employee, return of information, they are nuggets of gold. And although sometimes we get frustrated with some of the asks of those reports, and, it's just a place to go though. So if they're asking for, something that you don't see that's in the budget, a big one that's up on everyone's radar right now are sit-stand workstations. Well, it's not to say that that's bad, but how are we going to implement that? How can we pare that back and figure out a feasible way? But at least the value in your employee reports is you're working backwards. The control is often the best control, or one of the best controls that you could be doing, and it will very likely be impactful. It's going to reduce your injuries. It may increase your productivity, increase your customer or patient care, all of these things that kind of come into play that were often are challenges that get thrown in the mix. And we just need to kind of reverse engineer it. How do we take those and kind of go backwards to fit into our other program elements, and then maybe baby step it along the way from a financial perspective so that we can get those reports in there. But those employee reports, when you're trying to get performance up, are key, definitely key. All right, and then we have the risk assessment component. So we know we have to do the hazard identification. If you don't want a complete, Santa list of hazards that you have to check twice, then we need to do risk assessments. Because if you were to try to find a control for every hazard, everyone either identified or communicated or came up on a workplace inspection or accident investigation, that's all we would do. There would be no time for anything else. And the fact of the matter is, I will be the first one to tell you that not every hazard needs a control. Not every hazard that you can see happening. You know, if I were to sit here and ask each and every one of you to put your hand up and reach for the sky, is everyone doing it? And then put it back down, you know, that was an extreme posture for your shoulder. Was it causing an issue for you? No. So yes, we identified it as an awkward posture for the shoulder, but it's just a hazard. There was no risk there for an injury. So we then need to kind of, the risk assessment process is one that you can start to carve out time because it's going to take off those hazards. It's going to minimize your to-do list. The question is, how are you doing them? So again, going back to the MSD prevention guidelines, there are two strategies. There is a simple risk assessment and there is an in-depth risk assessment. So an in-depth risk assessment is something that you would bring me in for. I would come in with my scales and my software programs and my calculators, and I would kind of find out, not just because of my professional opinion, but I would come back because of industry standards and guidelines and anthropometrics, exactly when you're kind of over the cusp of what is reasonable. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. And it may not be necessary every time, because in the prevention series, it states that if you have consensus, one of the things that I would say it's frustrating. I'll say it's frustrating. I'm trying to find a better word, but it's not. There's no better word. So I will say that telling you what you already know can be frustrating. Not just for me, but also probably for you. When you hire me in and you know exactly what my report's going to say, but you feel like you needed to go through, and sometimes you do. Sometimes there's politics involved. There's, Ministry of Labor. There's other factors dictating and navigating when you go into that in-depth risk assessment. But if it's something you already know, the supervisors know, the employees know, everyone has consensus that this ergonomic hazard is an issue, then you don't need to move into the calculations. You can start moving straight into how are we going to fix it. All it can be is a conversation at a table that says this is a problem, we need to fix it. You've identified it. That's part of the Occupational Health and Safety Act regulations. Now we need to control it. You've controlled it through a risk assessment that says we all agree this is not good. So try to do more of that. When you're looking at bringing out maybe some of your tools. Some of my clients will use things like Rula, they'll use Snook, and they do in-house risk assessments that are kind of on par with what I would do. But the question is, do you need to even be doing those? If everyone agrees it's a problem, save your time, move on to the next step, get your controls in place, because that's going to, again, help carve out that time element that you're struggling with. Because at the end of the day, what we really want to be doing, we don't want to be counting hazards, even though we have to, because the law says we have to. What we really want to be doing is minimizing, reducing, eliminating those hazards. We want to make sure that the workplace is safer, more comfortable, easier to do the things that we need to do, and we're going to do that through our controls. So, all right. So the question I have for a lot of controls, that if performance is part of your issue, so again, we're kind of stepping on multiple columns in my challenges, are if the maintenance of your program really falls flat because you're having trouble proving that the program is actually working, it usually falls into this area where controls are just getting out of hand. They're getting either expensive or just out of reach. So are the controls appropriate fix for the problem? Sometimes we're not doing enough. There's equally the same number of times where we are doing too much. I will often see the problem being trying to, my analogies are failing me today, but they're just too over-engineered. I've seen lift assists that could have been like a mobile crane that you would have got off Granger, and they are huge boom arms that have caused increase of force that requires your whole body weight to get to move. So yes, you did an engineering choice, you've put in a lift assist, but it's so engineered that it's actually causing more problems. So is the control appropriate for the hazard and for the situation? Next question, is it actually fixing the problem? Sometimes you have to wait to put the control in before you can answer that problem, but a lot of the times, if you have the right stakeholders at the table and you're asking that question ahead of time, you can save time, you can save money and energy by just asking that question theoretically. And I will tell you that right now, I do. When I come in and I'm doing an assessment at your workplace and I'm trying to figure out how I can best solve and mitigate some of these ergonomic hazards, I spitball them off the employees all the time. And sometimes, they're like, oh, I don't know. And I will definitely say, there's definitely a way I ask. I never promise anything. It's always a fact-finding mission. But I'm definitely wanting to determine, is it going to be feasible? Is it going to work? You don't want to spend money on a report that's going to have recommendations that are going to be falling flat 6 months later. So ask your stakeholders, ask your operators, they're experts in what they do. And often if you say, what about if we do this? I would say 9 times out of 10, I get a less engineered answer that's way better and more cost effective. So are they fixing the problem? Ask your operators. A lot of times they will know, or your employees. Sorry, I shouldn't just say operators. And the next question is, have they created new problems? So this one you'll definitely need to kind of put in place, determine, review, go back, which again is sections, I think steps 9 and 10 of our basic program that we're looking at. But definitely we do need someone to revisit that. Question is, going back on time, is that person you? I'm going to suggest no, it's not you. It's maintenance, or it's engineering, or it's someone from a joint health and safety committee, or it's a supervisor. If you're trying to do a follow-up on an ergonomic control, I would suggest that your program not delegate that to yourself. Find someone else who maybe has a little bit more well-rounded, because it may be helping with the injuries, but maybe it's not helping with production. So if you're going out there, you're going to be focused on, is it working? You're going to say, yeah, we're not getting injuries anymore. But meanwhile, we don't realize that employees are stopping using it, and 6 months down the road, the injury is going to come back. But employees are not using it because it's too cumbersome, because it doesn't allow to give them the proper patient care or duty of care that they want to do. So make sure that we have that follow-up. But again, as I suggested, I'm not saying that that should be you. So as we go through, these next ones are kind of above. There is nothing in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there's nothing in the prevention guidelines that are going to indicate that these are elements that you need to do. But again, I will say that the companies that I work with that do them, they are self-sustaining programs. They are just powerhouses of ergonomic programs. They are the best of the best. So what are they? They are, first off, a purchasing standard. What is that? That is simply a document or a part of your website, or however you get your employees and staff to purchase things, that throttles what their limits and choices are. So if you are looking at office chairs, then there are only maybe 3 chairs, maybe 5 chairs, maybe 1 chair, however you want to work your program, that they can pick. And if they need a new chair, that chair has an ergonomic stamp of approval. This is one of the easiest ways. The biggest challenge that I have, and I mean, when it comes to administration, everyone has it, whether you're healthcare, education, industry, manufacturing, doesn't matter, mining, everyone has an administration component, so we can all live this story to some extent. But, someone has and we get it. We go in, we do an ergonomic assessment, we recommend equipment, we go in 6 months later because it didn't work, something's not right, and it's not the equipment that we suggested. It's something different, and it's not doing the job. So vet that ahead of time. Provide, if it's tooling that you guys have put time and effort in, know that this is the best one that we like. This is the one that works most continuously, confidently across the board. Then put that on the purchasing standard. You know, it can save your time. You are no longer going to be required to make returning visits every time. And when people are starting to have problems and they're like, oh, I need a new mouse, or I need a new chair, or I need a new keyboard, the ones that they have to choose from are not maybe the nicest and brightest and the newest and fanciest, but they are tried, they are true, and they will work. And that takes that problem off your table. And who does the purchasing standard? Not you. Purchasing does the purchasing standard. So you may help in the initial phases to help set them up as part of the ergonomics program. But after that, that should be a responsibility of purchasing, that the product that they are purchasing is, from a health and safety perspective, the best product that they can get. The next element is your design. Anybody who's implementing a new workstation, a new tool, a new work area, looking at it from a paper perspective to make sure that it's going to do what you want it to do, not just from an ergonomics perspective, but from a production of, you know, a work process, a standard operating procedure, whatever dialogue you speak in terms of, I need to get a task done and I need it to be done correctly so that we can be productive and safe at the same time, then do it on paper. It is so much more time consuming because now you're having to go on the floor, you're having to start the process of hazard identification all over again, controls, putting in controls over things that are already made, reactive and hard. We're now having to retrofit things. So whenever you can, look to see how we can talk to your continuous improvement, your engineering, anyone who's maintenance, anyone who takes on that role that would kind of fall in the design, and see is, what are we doing to make sure that bad ergonomic design is not coming into our organization? Because again, if I know, oh, there's a new work process starting, that's good. But I know and have confidence that engineering at least is looking at some of the ergonomic issues. So I'm not saying you won't have any, but you won't have as many, and it will last a lot longer. So definitely look at, it's a high level element. It's not something, if you're struggling on just the basics, maybe not something to look at right now, but definitely a gold standard element that when we're looking at time, carves out a lot more time for you. And ergonomic committees. So we have to have a joint health and safety committee, and that's great, and I love them, and fabulous concept. I do love my joint health and safety committees. However, when we're talking about ergonomics and comparing it to things like electrical hazards and things that would cause critical injuries or fatalities, I will be the first to admit ergonomics may not be ranking really high. So if your job is safety and we have a joint health and safety committee, both of you may be having challenges getting down to the fact that, you know, yes, we understand that MSDs are what most of our employees are dealing with. However, we only have so much time in the day, and we need to deal with the stuff that's really ranking on a critical level. And so ergonomics falls down on the priority list and doesn't get addressed. So again, once again, your program starts to stall. Think about having a separate committee. Think about having a steering committee that just looks at ergonomics, and that's really their focus. And sometimes that really can help to start propel that ergonomic focus through your program and elevate the program so that, again, becomes more self-sustaining, becomes more of a cultural thing that's indicated. Okay, so that was a long time on time, but I know time is very valuable for most people. So a lot of this stuff is going to go into your other challenge, which is performance. When we're talking about surveillance, making sure that it's happening, making sure that it's doing well, is all going to come back to our monitoring and maintenance component, which is here. So first off, we have to be tracking it. just saying that, oh yes, we do hazard identification, but not really being able to bring up a list for, each job or position or task that actually identifies what those hazards are in a clear and succinct way, that's a problem. So if you're doing the work, if you're identifying the hazards, go back and figure out how are we tracking them. If it's paper-based, if it's, just a very time-consuming, laborious task, then we need to find a better way to track. So we want to make sure that what we're tracking is important and how we're tracking it is easy and that it works. So for instance, most of you will likely be tracking injuries, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the question is that tracking giving you the information you need? So I'll put a pin in that one. Which goes into the second point, are you tracking what you need? And lastly, is there any way when you're tracking those hazards, are you putting them and pairing them with some kind of priority? If you are just creating laundry lists, you are just creating more time that you need to deal with those. But if you pair that with a priority system, and that system can be self-made, it can be something you pull off the internet, something that, another department is using and you're going to borrow because I love that. And the goal is whatever you're tracking should be paired with some kind of quantifier to let you know, do I need to do this today? Do I need to do this tomorrow? Or is this good and we can let this coast for a bit? And with that tracking should come with some kind of scheduling. As I said, committees I have, they'll look at one document a month. That's great. It's on a schedule. You know that it's happening. Something is going on at least once. Anything you can do, whether it's the checklists are happening, that you can put them on a schedule, then at least there is a part of the program. Because I'll admit, having all components of a really robust ergonomics program trucking along seamlessly every day, every second is challenging, but we need those core pieces to be going and sustaining themselves without you doing them. And if they're not, then again, your program is just too much, too hard. So going into that multi-departmental, making sure that managers, it's built into the manager's objectives. That may be something that you need to make a business case for and take up the ladder, because I know from experience, a lot of managers don't really have a very clear direction on what that is and how they're supposed to support that ergonomics program. So make it clear. If there are things that you specifically want or need done, then we can try and do that through that multi-department approach. Okay, so some of your tracking. So WSIB, I would say, is something that's tracked relatively well. I would say if you're trying to make a case for things like return on investments, make a case that injuries are going down, I often find when that type of data is given to us and we are trying to come up with that case, I don't have enough data. I don't have things like body parts or length of time, because it may not, if you're just doing injury or hazards present, there's always going to be hazards present. So don't hang your progress or performance hat on reduction of hazards, because there's ergonomic hazards in everything we do. So we need to make sure that when we're tracking our injury statistics, that I'm going to be able to run reports easily. And even if you're just doing it in a simple Excel basis, which is great, it can generate that information very, very quickly, very easily, and again, becomes less work. So look at, are we tracking our WSIB? Maybe are we tracking our short-term and long-term disability, because that may also show implications that, if things are not so hard on the employee at work, they may not be actually getting injured as much off work. So we may start seeing those two go down as well. So tracking those, tracking your employee complaints. As I said, we want to document those anyways, because those often can have information that become very pertinent to the direction we need to go for controls or what we need to do as far as a fix goes. The other areas, and this is one that I would say, this laundry list here is one that maybe we're not tracking well. We kind of know, but we don't have a system that marry the injury and the productivity or customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction together. So the more we can integrate these things together, so that if we have high injuries, we also know that there's low productivity, there's low quality, there's high waste. Now all of a sudden, when I need to get support, so again, I'm moving into another pillar that we talked about, I'm not just talking the same words over and over again. I have a bevy of things that I can pull why change needs to happen. And you may find that the support just comes very easily when we're speaking their language. And that's often what we'll find is in health and safety and return to work, you know, we work really hard with the employees and there's a certain vernacular that we start to use. However, when we have to move outside of that role, that vernacular is not impactful. It's not impactful in a productivity conversation. It's not impactful in a customer service conversation, or a waste or quality. So the more we can align how we talk about our ergonomic hazards and our ergonomic program that's going to align with their wording, the easier and the more support you will get. Hands down. And we've seen it a lot of times. If I can say that, you know, to quality, that this ergonomic hazard, because of the distance and the lighting and the issues that we're having high neck issues as far as an injury conversation goes. But because of that, we're also showing low quality because they physically cannot see and it's too far away. Well, now that change will get fixed. And your neck injury is going to go away because we're not now talking, well, yeah, I have neck injuries. That's not quality's problem. That's your problem. And so now we're saying, well, you're having issues because I'm having issues because this is too far away and the lighting's not high enough for them to be able to see. And now we're also having to do quality, 100% quality inspections, which is now pulling from productivity. So now you've kind of tucked into two other kind of conversations that will get you that support, which moves us into this category. So if you are having or feeling like you're getting low support, often I get people say, well, it's just the culture. And that's hard. I'll be the first to say I don't really have a good answer for cultural issues, but it's not to say that those cultural issues can't change. It's just going to be you have to be on board for the uphill battle. So investigate, start looking at why we have areas of those low support. So whether it be specifically when it's in a relationship, kind of upper management employee union, where is the disconnect? Why are you struggling? It may help you, even just from a conversational standpoint, maybe communicate and articulate what you need better to get their support from them. And as I said, you may be able to do it through numbers like quality and production, but sometimes it may be other issues. And so I can't, that is definitely a whole issue on its own. And that cultural conversation is definitely, start with asking why and see where that takes you. The financial support is often challenging, knowing that we don't have resources. Again, going back to the previous slide, you align it with quality, customer satisfaction, productivity, waste, something that really does have kind of hard numbers associated with that. Financial support often comes naturally. So those are good strategies to kind of try and implement and find. Again, might take a bit of investigation. And then you have your resource support. So luckily, I mean, it's not in black and white. The Occupational Health and Safety Act does not say thou shalt do ergonomics and have a fabulous ergonomics program, but it does have section 25H or 2H. So we do have the fact that we must take every precaution reasonable. We know that. We need to make it aware that everyone else knows that as well, that ergonomics falls under that, even though the word may not be as obvious in that green book as some other wording. So we have Ministry of Labor blitzes. Those are often good times if you are trying to elevate a certain aspect. You may be able to get more support if there's a Ministry of Labor blitz. We've when I started, I would say that Ministry of Labor Blitz, I was like, oh no, and I was always so concerned for my clients and thinking, oh no, this is bad, and I would say probably 60-40 split. There was like 40% that were still feeling the same way I was. Oh no, this is bad. But there was probably 60% that were like, no, this is good. This is good. I like blitzes. Blitzes give me a little bit more of a soapbox to stand on. And if you're not using that soapbox, that may be something you want to do. You may want to look at aligning your goals and your strategies with the Ministry of Labor Blitzes. They're on their website. They're very open and transparent about what they're doing, what they're looking for. And so align your program to kind of go with some of those things, and you may find that the support conversation at least is a little bit easier. The last one is a gap analysis. If you're finding issues with support, go through a gap analysis of your program and figure out where the disconnects are. Where are you not aligning with the organizational goals and objectives? Because if your program is a standalone and does not align with everyone else's, you can't ask for that support, because you literally are the white person holding the white flag, because you're kind of standing off to the side. So, and I will say, based on the fact that we beg, borrow, and steal a lot of what we use in ergonomics, because it's not rocket science. Everyone has to do it. The hazards are the same, whether you're in healthcare, education, down in a mine, up in space, it doesn't matter. The hazards are the same. So going online and getting pieces and elements and building your program from that perspective is great. You're not reinventing. We do that, connect to the organization. We're going somewhere else. We're going outside our four walls, and we're not aligning anymore to what our goals. So look to find out ways that if we're doing the hazard identification, that it's happening in other ways where they're looking for gaps in their processes. And if it's happening at the same time, again, it gets delegated to someone else, comes back on the time. So a gap analysis can be a great starting point. It's 2020. If you're looking at reasons why we don't have support, going through, and the gap analysis should be focused on support. You don't just do a general gap analysis, look for every gap. We're looking for specific reasons of why we're not getting that. Same with if we're not getting performance. Do your gap analysis with a performance focus, driven questions, so that you're going to get some fairly detailed answers. Okay, so the best way to get your support, definitely involvement. Who and how can you involve more people to get on your wagon and help support your cause? So look for ways for doing that, whether that's through committees, whether that's through the next step, which is education, or your last one, which is benefit. Align, find out people's weak spots. If you want something to go well for your program, and you need support from someone else, then they need to see it be a benefit for their program as well. So look for those benefits, and it could be just a sit down. Look, I'm struggling with my program. You're kind of the stopgap. We need to kind of figure out and just have a brainstorming conversation of what's the determining factor. Why is my maintenance of my program becoming so arduous? And how can I make it better? So this it's 2020. Maybe just a good time to start to people letting you bare bones. Slides don't want to progress. There we go. And lastly, we don't have many slides, so I'm sorry it's 2, and I realize I'm running a little bit late. But going back to the benefit conversation, it really aligns with what are your key performance indicators. We often make it about money. We make it about lowering our WSIB costs. If you're doing that from an MSD perspective, you are going to have a hard time. It's going to show potentially years before you get to a standpoint where you're actually lowering your WSIB costs. Great things could be happening in your program, but because my WSIB costs haven't seen that yet, I'm not showing a performance. I'm not showing positive gains on my program, and that may not be the case at all. So try not to make it all about WSIB. If your key performance indicators determining whether or not your program is working, whether or not it's excelling, is all based on WSIB, those are my clients that struggle because they get very little support because they're never really achieving their goals. So try and come up with different goals. Come up with goals and performance indicators that are going to be more in line with maybe productivity, more in line with waste, more in line with quality, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, so on and so forth. Because of the involvement and support of at least one other department, but also you're going to find that there's more information that you can, that you're making a positive change and a positive improvement when it comes to ergonomics. If we're finding that key performance indicators are on par and they're good and we're still struggling with the maintenance of our program, then let's take some of it back. Let's go back and see, what are we doing that we're not doing well? Do we need to do it? Let's try and pare back on how we're doing it and come back to just more of a basics program. Okay, so once you know you've aligned your performance indicators, stand the departmental goals, you've built in ergonomics to help achieve that. So for instance, if engineering goes to something that's going cycle time of X, good ergonomics will help them achieve that. So it's value added to them to have ergonomics in place. And collect that data. Start collecting data. You can never show that your program is doing well without the right data. Otherwise, it's just subjective, and we're not going to be able to get the support we need if we're going on subjective. So for an example, if we are required to do 100% inspection, whether it's in a lab or whether it's a manufacturing part or in healthcare for cleanliness, but we're having to go back once, twice, maybe 3 times to make sure everything we touch is 100% inspected for quality, that's going to be a waste of productivity, going to be a waste on quality, and it's going to have very, very negative effects on ergonomics because now our frequency, our repetition hazard is through the roof. So there's ways that we can try and get those other people on board and those key performance indicators from quality perspective aligned with our ergonomics ones. So look at how those organization goals are aligning. And the other one, as we said earlier, is sometimes that your program is performing and it's just not registering. So I have said this a lot in a lot of my webinars, and I will say it again, and it is making sure that you're celebrating your successes. Use bulletin boards, use celebratory events. Are you getting a financial return? I'm not sure. I know WSIB is reworking their thing, but when we used to get a refund because of low injuries, is that coming back to you? Is it coming back into your program so that you can take the next steps and elevate it further? But look at finding ways of taking your successes and turning that into more of a global event as far as your organization is concerned, making sure that everyone is aware, because too often ergonomics gets absorbed in a lot of other things. If you've done an implementation or a control change that's done something good to productivity, then it gets absorbed into the engineering or the continuous improvement or whatever else groups or people that were working on the program. And it's no longer that we're tracking that data so that we can take ownership of them. And then when we can show them objectively, not subjectively, that we had a success, don't wait till year end when we're doing our review. Celebrate them right then and there. This becomes a huge bit. If culture is your challenge for maintaining your program and progressing your program, celebrating your successes and making people aware of the importance of what you're doing with the ergonomics program becomes really key with changing people's minds and changing that ergonomic culture. All right, for those of you that have held on to the very end, I'm impressed. So again, I ask you if there are more specific into reach out to the PROergonomics page on LinkedIn or email us, and we will get that information and potentially do a follow-up webinar where we can maybe be more specific with the topics that we talk about. We are getting back into our offer. So year 5 of our Ergonomics conference. There's a great conference with fabulous networking opportunities, and if I do say so myself, some relatively good ergonomic content. There's kind of a resource kit that you end up walking away from, and we are going to be starting it in June, but we will be starting our free registrations every month with the webinars that you. So if you're interested, please email that you are interested in entering the draw to win registration for IEC. And this year, for our IEC, we're really, really excited because we are actually going to be launching something. And it's a secret, it's top secret, but it will be coming soon, and it will definitely tie in today a lot easier. So we're very, very excited about that. So that's going to be 2020, and we'll be launching that at the IEC. So for those of you that need some ergonomic help and want something that's going to make your program a little bit more self-sustaining, you should be excited too. So if that is it for me, next webinar is on February 27th. It is going to be a good one. So help workers help maintain themselves. One of my points was to delegate. This is a good one. This is a delegation one. So please attend. I think Sarah might be doing this one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jen. Anyways, either way, both are fabulous and will be massively helpful. So please feel free to attend. You will be sent the YouTube recording of it, so you'll be able to catch up and get that information some way, somehow. And that is it. Any questions that you've had, we will try and address. And if there's lots of them, we will kind of be going through and sending out a kind of a more formal, I guess, mail that will address all the questions. All right. And if you have some that I see, there's a couple in there that I'll just address independently, and I'll reach out to you. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I apologize for going over. I know your time is important, especially since we spent so much time talking about your time. Anyways, Happy New Year. Great to see you all again. And for those of you new, again, welcome, and thank you very much. Take care.